Sydney and Taylor explore the whole wide world by Jacqueline Davies, illustrated by Deborah Hawking. Chapters 8 through 12. Chapter 8 of Sydney and Taylor Explore the Whole Wide World. Written by Jacqueline Davies. Chapter 8. Remember, he was hunting frogs and he told them he was going to hunt them, and they all laughed, and he said, "You better be careful, something's hunting for you." Chapter 8. "Yipes!" shouted Taylor. An enormous dog was running his way. Taylor could hear her ferocious barking. He could smell her dangerous scent. He could see the slobber hanging from her lips. Oh my goodness. Danger! Snap! Taylor curled into a spiky ball. The ball rolled into the water and began floating downstream. The dog reached the water's edge and barked loudly. She paced back and forth, ready to leap in. Oh no! Just then, Sydney strolled out from under a bush. "Well, hello there," said Sydney, swishing his tail back and forth. "Mighty fine day, wouldn't you say?" Remember, he's a skunk. The giant dog stopped barking. She couldn't understand Sydney's words. Dogs had lost their wildness by living with humans. They could no longer speak the language of the wild. Still, they could be fierce. She doesn't look too friendly. Sydney advanced slowly, putting himself between the dog and the water. His tail waved like a warning flag. The dog backed up the hill. She let out a sharp yap. I would say it's time you headed home," said Sydney sternly. The dog was confused, but she knew that she wanted the spiky ball floating in the water. She barked loudly and rushed straight at Sydney. Uh-oh. Chapter 9. Look at that face. Oh my goodness. In a flash, Sydney turned himself around, lifted his tail, and squirted a stream of stinky musk. The dog yowled and ran away whimpering. Oh my goodness, imagine that stink. "And that's how a skunk gets the job done," said Sydney, very proud. "Hey, Stripe!" shouted a frog who had peeped up from underwater to watch the show. "Your friend floated away. You better hurry, or you'll never see him again." Sydney scuffled along the edge of the water as fast as he could. He lifted his nose to catch the familiar scent of his old friend, and there, after a few minutes, he spotted Taylor tangled in the branches of a tree. Sydney pulled the shivering hedgehog out of the water. See how he's in the branches? "Oh, Sydney," wailed Taylor, "I did it again. I curled into a ball. I always do. I say I won't, and then I do." "It's your nature," said Sydney, putting an arm around his friend. "You're a hedgehog, and a frightened hedgehog rolls up into a ball." "I bet you fought off the dog," said Taylor. "I bet you were fierce and wild." "I gave her something to think about," said Sydney. "That's my nature. We are who we are, Taylor." He patted his friend, then looked around. "And in the meantime, we're still lost." Pretty pleasant place to be lost. As they began to walk back to the road, Taylor lifted his nose and sniffed. "Do you smell it, Sydney?" "I can't smell anything but me," said Sydney, because of course he's still smelling that musk. "I can," shouted Taylor, hurrying toward the road. "I know that smell. It's Miss Nancy." Chapter 10. "Do you see him over there on the side of the road?" "And I know that smell," said Sydney. "It's a tuna fish sandwich." "It's coming from her car," said Taylor. The two small animals watched from under a bush. "There's a tuna fish sandwich in that car," said Sydney, "and I'm going to eat it." "You can't get into Miss Nancy's car," said Taylor. Cars were loud and dangerous. They often hurt small animals. "Oh, yes, I can," said Sydney. "It's an expedition. Plus, I'm really hungry." He began to cross the road. She's picking flowers. Yipes, said Taylor, and he hurried to catch up with his brave, hungry friend. Just then a loud truck came growling along a bend in the road. It was going very fast. See it? Sydney looked up. Taylor looked up. Miss Nancy looked up. But it was too late. Snap! Taylor curled into a tight ball in the middle of the road. And the truck kept coming faster and faster. Is he going to get run over? Chapter 11. Stop! If Sydney had known how to speak the words of humans, he would have shouted that word as loudly as he could. But all he could do was stamp his feet and hiss in the middle of the road. The truck kept coming faster and faster. Sydney stood up by his friend. Stop! Shouted Miss Nancy. She stepped into the middle of the road. She waved a bunch of flowers at the truck driver. The truck slowed down. Are you in trouble? Called the truck driver. No, said Miss Nancy, but you are driving very fast on a small road, and there are animals that cross here often. Miss Nancy kept talking to the driver. Taylor and Sydney couldn't understand her human words. Taylor, hissed Sydney, get up. Taylor uncurled himself. I did it again. Follow me, said Sydney. Taylor and Sydney scrambled into the back of Miss Nancy's car. A moment later, Miss Nancy got into the car. She put the flowers on the front seat. Wow, she said, that is some skunk smell. She closed the door and drove home. At her house, she left the car door open while she took the flowers inside. Sydney and Taylor scampered to their burrow. Miss Nancy came outside and closed the car door. I wonder what happened to my tuna fish sandwich, said Miss Nancy. She smiled and looked toward the potting shed. Do you think she knows about that burrow? Chapter 12. The best expedition ever, said Sydney, collapsing into his armchair. Promise me we'll never do it again. We'll see, said Taylor, returning the map of the whole wide world to the wall. He traced his paw over the path of their journey. They had gone to places unknown. They had been wild animals. They had battled ferocious predators. Best of all, they had returned home. We should write a book about our great adventure, said Taylor, yawning. We could be authors. Authors, said Sydney, closing his eyes. Wouldn't that be something? Imagine that. And that is the end of the adventure of Sydney and Taylor. Explore the Whole Wide World by Jacqueline Davies. You may want to go to your nearest library and check out the next Sydney and Taylor book.